Hey guys, I'm Craig, and today for the Surfboard Guide, we're going to check out the Blue Lotus by Alex Cruz, Shapes or Die. This is the Blue Lotus by Alex Cruz. You would have seen a couple of weeks ago we did our initial thoughts on the Blue Lotus. Got lots of comments like, where's the surf footage? That's our initial thoughts clip. That's kind of like when we first get the board. Just check it out. What are we thinking? Ask you guys some questions about fins, everything else. Since then, we've surfed the board a lot more. We know what fins work. We got recommendations from you. Thank you everyone that commented, shared stuff, let us know their thoughts. People already had the board. But anyway, this is the Blue Lotus by Alex Cruz, and mine is a 5'11", 19.5, 2 9/16, and it's 33 litres. So if you didn't check out the initial thoughts, I'll go through the Blue Lotus in a little bit of detail. Its greatest feature is probably this low chimed rail, which I hope you can see, which creates this flat step kind of deck, chimed rail thing, goes the whole way up the board. And what that does is that allows the board to hold a lot of volume and thickness through the center without having this like crazy big beefy square rail. So you get lots of float, lots of volume through the center, especially under the chest, under your front foot, coming down a nice rail, really easy to surf and really easy to paddle and everything. Nice little beak and a whole lot of fun. The Blue Lotus, a little bit of rocker through the nose, pretty kind of 80s inspired, nothing crazy, especially in the top, fairly flat through the top, that lift through the nose, and you can see that beak there. When you flip it over, I feel like you got this kind of like 80s vibe on the top with the flat deck, chimed rail, all that sort of stuff. You flip it over, and if you forgot what was happening in the top, you wouldn't be doing too bad to think the bottom of it just looks like kind of a performance shortboard. So in that top, you've got all that stuff that makes paddling and surfing really easy, really, really fun. But in the bottom, where all the work gets done in the water, it's kind of like just a performance shortboard. So a little bit of lift through the nose, fairly flat through the board. And I think Alex says there's a bit of a V through the entry here, single through the center. You can feel a really nice little double just through the fins here, and then a flat, it just flattens out through the exit in the tail. So yeah, surfing the Blue Lotus, paddling is a dream. 33 litres, feels really good, feels spot on with volume, paddles like a dream, gets across flat sections like a dream. But when you get that rail in the water you want to turn, it's really easy to turn, really removable, very easy to surf. And another thing that makes it quite easy to surf and different to, you've probably checked out our Lotus review we did a while ago. I think some people call it the Red Lotus, I just call it the Lotus, but I rode that a little bit shorter, square tail. But this also has this nice little like bump hip, so it brings in a bit wider here, but then it allows it to bring into a nicer, tighter tail a little bit quicker than not having a hip. And then it comes into this nice kind of round, not quite pinned, but a nice kind of narrow round tail. So super maneuverable off the back. Nice little hip makes it easy to come into this tight tail and very, very easy to surf. So I've been surfing the Blue Lotus now, had it for a couple of months. You would have seen Stab, Stace Galbraith and Alex Cruz put a really cool review on the Blue Lotus and the Lotus, so the Lotus Series. Looking at both boards, we checked out the Lotus. We're years ahead of Stab and all the stuff they do. So, we checked out the Lotus like a year or two ago. Just kidding, Stab do awesome stuff. Stace a legend. Can't speak highly enough of them. But yeah, we checked out Lotus a while ago. Absolutely loved it. Got heaps of epic feedback from people that had checked it out. Really liked it. But being a flatter, wider, thicker, fun shape, I think people thought it was a small wave groveler. And it was, but it was also a very, very capable surfboard. When people saw the Blue Lotus came out, a little bit narrower through the front end, and then especially this round tail, I think people initially jumped to think this was sort of like a step up. And I'm not saying you can't ride it as a step up, but what I've found across the period I've surfed the Blue Lotus, it's actually more of a kind of everyday, daily driver, for lack of a better word, that is super capable. So this volume, this thickness through the center, the flat deck holding all that volume, lets you surf it in smaller kind of average conditions. A lot of our footage, waves aren't great. A little bit of push, but it's not 6 to 8 foot. surfs well in waves in, you know, kind of waist, chest high. So, you know, 2 foot, definitely is capable. Probably doesn't have the same lower end capability as the Lotus or Red Lotus, but it's not out of its, like, you know, depth in smaller kind of average stuff. So paddles well, gets into them, and that volume under your feet. And, you know, a not too curvy rocker lets you get across sections. So it surfs pretty small stuff pretty well. You know, but in that everyday stuff, a lot of us would be surfing from kind of, you know, waist high to overhead, whether it's offshore, onshore, good or bad. That's where the Blue Lotus, I felt, really sat as that daily driver. Super capable, you keep it in your car. For most conditions, the Blue Lotus is going to work. And different to the Lotus we checked out, we've got a 5-fin setup. So that means you can mix up different fin setups for conditions to find out what works best for you. What lots of people thought about the Blue Lotus was that it was a step up, and it definitely is capable. This is a 511 at 33 liters. This is kind of my shortboard length and my new shortboard volume. So this is why it was a daily driver. If you did want the Blue Lotus as a step up, you know, I could ride this as a 6'1", 6'3", 6'5", whatever. It would be super capable, and it is very capable in bigger waves. The things that work for it well in small waves also give it a hand in bigger and better waves. So all that volume under the chest, when it's bigger, you're going to be getting into waves nice, easily, and early. You know, you're not going to get into late critical drops because you're into them nice and easy. Enough rocker through the front end of the board to keep it out of trouble. So steeper later drops, you're going to get into waves, not too much trouble, really easy to surf. And this rounded pin kind of tail is going to be super movable. So if the board's 6'4", 6'5", you know, 6 inches longer than you are tall, it's not going to be hard to turn. So it also can be a good step up. But the one I rode, shortboard length, shortboard volume, and it was an awesome daily driver. The Blue Lotus was a really good chance to check out a whole variety of fins from Futures. So different to the Lotus, which I had as a 3-fin, and I think we rode the AMs in the Lotus by memory. I'll put a link to that review in this review, so you can check that as well if you haven't. This is what I went with first in the Blue Lotus. This is the AM2s, so the large AMs by Futures. Felt epic. This is my go-to thruster set. I think I've done over 100 reviews now, and I've probably spoken about this fin in 90% of them, whether it's with Futures or FCS. Really predictable. I know how they work, and they really help me feel out of board. And these felt absolutely epic. So if you look at the Blue Lotus, got AMs, bingo bango, lock them in. They're a great set of fins. Speaking with Alex Cruz, who shaped the board, he quite likes the Haydens. So the Haydens are a speed generating fin. These are the large EHS1s. He likes them as a thruster, and he also likes the Hayden quad rears as a quad set. I didn't love them, and that's why I think it's really cool about surfboards and fins. It's not one size fits all, and what works for someone doesn't also work for someone else. So I thought, being a speed generating fin, these would be really quick and be really great, and I tried them in less than stellar conditions. Didn't love them. They were okay, but they weren't my favorite. Again, if you have them, you want to check them out. They work really well. Haydens do a quad rears as well to go with them. Definitely worth checking out. They just weren't for me. In the thruster set, what I loved, especially when there's a little bit of push, these are the John Florence Tech Flex. So you've probably heard of John Florence. He's a surfer from Hawaii who's been doing pretty well over the last few years. And this is his fins. So they were probably my favorite thruster set, especially when waves had a little bit of push. So it didn't have to be big, but just a little bit of push. When it kind of got to like chest high and above, these felt like they had the best blend of you know, maneuverability, release, speed, turning, and everything from a thruster set. So these were my go-to thruster set, because I'll talk about these quads in a second, for the Blue Lotus. And they are the John Tech Flex. They are a large template. I think they come in a green instead of the red, which is medium, maybe a blue, which is small. I'm not really sure. But yeah, these are large. Tech Flex are quite stiff. They're a carbon fin. That felt amazing. Favorite thruster set for the Blue Lotus. What I absolutely loved in the Blue Lotus, and I feel like I've harped on about this strange quad setup a million times, is the Tech Flex, AM Tech Flex by Futures. But what I have here is, these come a 5-fin set. These are the large rears. I think they only do one size of rears, I'm not really sure. And these are the medium, so AM2 Tech Flex rears, AM1 Tech Flex leading fins. These fins don't actually have too much disparity in the size between the front and the rear fins, and they just feel super balanced. So I absolutely love this quad setup in this board. Why did I love it? Had all the drive I wanted. These fins were, the ones that I liked here were great. They didn't have the drive of a quad. So this felt really, really good. But I'm a bit of a, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate quad setups. So I love the drive you get out of them. I love that sometimes you do a turn, you feel like you're on tracks and you can do no wrong. Sometimes they feel like they're too big, I can't turn, they don't have the pivot of a thruster. But what I've found with this quad setup that I've thrown in quite a few reviews, and if you've seen our reviews, you've probably seen it before, being balanced, being very similar in size, they don't have the things that I don't like about quad setups. They only do the good things. So they're quite maneuverable, they have lots of drive, really easy to turn and really easy to surf. As we mentioned, there's this nice little bump kind of flyer on the Blue Lotus. And some people might find that in different setups, especially if the board's shorter, quite skatey. The quad setup definitely tightens that up. And if you don't like that skatey feel, this feels really, really good. So if I had to go with 2 sets, I'd be John Tech Flex for the thruster, and I'd be my weird quad combo Tech Flex for the quad. Thank you so much. I had a few people write to us who have this board and wanted to give us feedback. They'd seen it early on, they'd gone and got it. They've had different fins. Supposedly 2+1 setup works really well. I didn't try it only because the board can already, if I'm riding 2+1, I've got 2 large leading fins and a small trailer fin. I'm wanting to loosen up the tail. With this, little flyer bump coming into a tighter tail, this board already has that looseness and that maneuverability that I want. I didn't feel like I needed to go to a 2+1 setup, but supposedly the Captain Finco Christensen 2+1s are really good. And thank you so much for letting us know. And definitely, you can put a 2+1 setup in this. If you're riding it in smaller average conditions, it might make it really fun. But I definitely like this board when it was kind of, waist high to head high and overhead. And the thrusters, the John Tech Flex and the Tech Flex quad setups with the medium as larges were what I felt at home with. Overall, absolutely love the Blue Lotus. I'll put links into our original Lotus review we did a few years ago. I love that thing. There's lots of things we did with surfboards in the 80s that were easy to surf, they were fun, and it's really cool to see, not just Alex Cruz, but other shapers bring some of those back. But it's also good in the last, 30 to 40 years, what we've learnt from those shapes that did and didn't work with, more modern rockers through the bottom of the board, refining chime rails and stuff like that to bring a complete, modern package that gets the best of those 80s and earlier designs into a much more modern package. And I feel like, the Lotus and the Blue Lotus definitely have the best of both those worlds. Like I said, with the quad setup, the 5-fin setup, you could try a whole variety of fins. We've got feedback that 2+1s really work, but personally, I really like this quad setup to tighten the thing up, give it nice drive and maneuverability, and made it really easy to surf. Who is the Blue Lotus for? Almost anyone. I think if you size it appropriately, this flat deck with this volume through the center is really easy to paddle, really easy to get into waves, and very easy to surf. This chimed rail that drops down into a nice lower rail gives it really nice maneuverability. So even though you've got this thick kind of flat deck and bulkier center, this drop away chime rail brings you a nice rail. It's going to be really easy to surf. So it's going to be good for someone who is, beginner, intermediate, wanting to progress their surfing. But again, it's also an amazing board for someone who's intermediate through to an advanced surfer. Super maneuverable, great to get into waves, works well in conditions from 2 to 6 foot to larger. You can muck around with a whole set of fins, and it really is an epic daily driver. I know surfing with it locally, people I knew and people I didn't know were all coming up wanting to check it out. They love the look of the beak, the chime rail, and that kind of 80s vibe. And they're also kind of shocked seeing how well it performed, just like a performance kind of shortboard in the water, on waves and under the feet. Look, overall, absolutely love the Blue Lotus. Thanks so much to Alex Cruz and the guys at the Glass Lab for the opportunity to check it out. And hope you get a chance to check one out too. Thanks so much for watching.